The night was supposed to be quiet. The hum of sprinklers, the faint chirp of crickets, the smell of fresh-cut grass lingering in the cool air. But all of that dissolved the moment I saw the glint of steel aimed at my boy's chest. "Don't move!" the man barked. His voice cracked the silence like a whip. My heart stopped. I froze halfway down the driveway, 60 years old and feeling every brittle year in my bones. My son, just 20, barely stepping into manhood, stood rigid under the harsh beam of the street lamp, his palms raised high. His wide brown eyes darted between me and the gun. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice small, like the frightened child he used to be when thunderstorms rattled his bedroom window. The man holding the weapon wasn't a stranger. He was the HOA's so-called enforcer, the 35-year-old bully who strutted around our neighborhood like he owned it. Tonight, though, his arrogance had teeth. His face was flushed with rage, jaw tight, eyes wild and unblinking. He gripped the pistol with both hands like he had been waiting for this moment all along. The metallic scent of gun oil carried across the space between us, sharp and bitter. My throat tightened, my mouth dry as dust. All I could hear was the thundering in my chest and the trembling breath of my boy. "You crossed the line," the man hissed. "Trespassing." My son was standing in our own driveway, the very patch of cracked pavement where he had learned to ride his bike, where he used to shoot hoops until the sun dropped behind the rooftops. The idea that he could be accused of trespassing here was absurd. No, worse than absurd. It was madness. "Sir," I said, forcing my voice steady, though every word scraped against fear, "he hasn't done anything wrong. Put the gun down." The man sneered. His lips twisted into something between a smirk and a snarl. And then, with a flourish, he yanked a leather wallet from his pocket and snapped it open, never lowering the gun. The badge caught the lamplight. "Federal Marshal," he declared, his tone dripping with authority. "I'm authorized to act. Don't question me." I felt the world tilt. Federal Marshal? Since when? I had seen this man pass out violation slips for lawn heights, scream at kids for chalk drawings on the sidewalk, and fine retirees for holiday wreaths. Now he expected me to believe he was law enforcement. Behind me, somewhere deeper in the cul-de-sac, a curtain fluttered shut. Someone was watching, but no one was stepping outside. The neighborhood that had always seemed so pristine and picture-perfect now felt like a stage set for a nightmare. And then came the distant wail of sirens. Blue and red lights splashed across the houses as a cruiser rounded the corner, tires squealing against the asphalt. For one brief second, I let myself hope. The police were here. Surely they'd put an end to this madness. But when the officers stepped out and saw him, the man with the gun, the badge held high, their expressions flickered with confusion instead of urgency. One even addressed him directly. "Marshal, what's going on here?" Marshal. They said it like it was the truth. His claim was unquestionable. My son's breath hitched, his chest rising and falling in rapid bursts. His eyes locked onto mine, desperate, begging for reassurance I couldn't give. Because in that moment I realized something terrible. Whether the badge was real or not, whether the police believed him or not, we were trapped. This wasn't about weeds in the yard or paint on the shutters anymore. This was about power, about a man willing to point a gun at a 20-year-old just to prove he controlled every inch of this neighborhood. The gun stayed up. The officers didn't intervene, and a cold truth clawed into my ribs. If no one was willing to stop him, who was going to save my son? I'll never forget the night that gun was pointed at my son. But to understand how it came to that, you have to know what life was like before. The neighborhood, the home we built, the people who surrounded us, and the man who decided none of it would ever be enough unless it was under his control. I'm a 60-year-old father, a husband, and a man who's worked hard his entire life for one thing: stability. I spent 4 decades as a mechanic. My hands are scarred, my knuckles worn down, the skin thick with years of grease and grit that never really washed off, no matter how much soap I used. That garage, that job, it paid for the roof over our heads, the food on the table, and eventually the small but beautiful home in a quiet subdivision I thought would be our forever place. My wife and I bought the house when our son was still a little boy. He was 6 at the time, all knobby knees and boundless energy. I still remember him riding his first bike down our driveway, wobbling past the mailbox as my wife clapped and cheered. That driveway, our driveway, wasn't just concrete. It was the heart of our family's memories. Barbecues in the summer, snow shoveling competitions in the winter, late-night chalk drawings that stained the asphalt in pinks and blues until the rain washed them away. The neighborhood itself was meant to be safe, a sanctuary. The lawns were trimmed, the fences whitewashed, and the HOA pamphlet promised a perfect place to raise a family. We believed it. We really did. That was before we met him. His name was Derek, 35 years old, built like he lived at the gym, with a sharp jawline and a colder stare. From the moment he became head of the HOA's security committee, the air in the neighborhood shifted. He wasn't just enforcing rules, he was making them. And he loved nothing more than to remind people he had authority. The first time I saw his true colors was over something small. My wife had hung a spring wreath on our front door. Bright yellows, soft greens, a cheerful thing that made our porch look alive. Within a day, a slip appeared in our mailbox. Violation, non-compliant, seasonal decoration. I thought it was a mistake. Surely no one cared about a wreath. But when I went to the next HOA meeting, Derek was there, leaning back in his chair like a king on his throne, arms crossed as he read off complaints. "Your wreath," he said flatly, pointing at me with a pen, "isn't uniform with community standards. Remove it or face a fine." The room fell silent. Neighbors avoided my eyes. My wife squeezed my hand under the table. I tried to laugh it off, tried to reason with him, but his eyes never softened. "It's just a wreath," I said. "It's a rule," he replied. And then he smiled. That smug, tight-lipped smile that said he enjoyed every second of control. I walked out that night unsettled, but not afraid. Not yet. Over time, the rules kept piling up. No garden gnomes, no cars are parked in the driveway overnight, no trash bins visible from the street. Every small thing became another chance for Derek to flex his authority. He patrolled the streets with a clipboard during the day, but it was his night walks that chilled me. I'd see him under the lamplight, shadow stretching long, jotting notes in his little book, always watching, always waiting. My son noticed it too. He was older now in college, commuting back and forth. He'd pull into the driveway late, and sometimes he'd call me from his car before getting out. "Dad," he whispered once, "he's out there, just standing, watching the house." I told him to ignore it. I told him we weren't doing anything wrong, but deep down a pit of unease was growing. Derek didn't just want compliance, he wanted obedience. And if he couldn't get it, he'd take it. The breaking point before the gun incident came a few weeks earlier. My son had set up a basketball hoop in the driveway, the same one he'd used as a kid. He and a couple of his friends were shooting hoops, laughing, their sneakers squeaking on the pavement. That's when Derek appeared. He didn't yell right away. He just stood there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Then he barked, "You're disturbing the peace. Pack it up." "They're just playing ball," I said, stepping out from the garage. "Driveways are not recreational areas," he shot back, his voice rising. "Remove it, or I'll remove it myself." My son tried to argue, but I pulled him back. We took the hoop down that night. My boy's face was red with frustration, fists clenched at his sides. "Why do we let him push us around?" he asked. "Because I didn't want to fight. Not then. Not over a hoop." But looking back, I see it clearly now. That was the first warning sign. Derek wasn't satisfied with the rules. He wanted dominance. He wanted to break us down, piece by piece, until even laughter on a summer night felt like rebellion. I should have stood up to him then. I should have recognized that every slip of paper, every fine, every threat wasn't just about the house or the yard. It was about control. Because when a man like Derek gets a taste of power, he doesn't stop. He escalates. And before long, we weren't just fighting for wreaths or basketball hoops anymore. We were fighting for our safety, for our dignity, for our lives. And I had no idea just how far he was willing to go to prove we belonged to him. It started small. It always does. That's the trick with men like Derek. They don't come at you all at once. They chip away, little cuts, one after another, until you're bleeding from 1,000 wounds you never saw coming. The letters multiplied first. Every week, another Notice of violation slipped into our mailbox. The font was sterile, professional, but the words felt like accusations carved into stone. Improper shrub height. Visible trash bin on collection day. Unauthorized basketball equipment. Excessive driveway stains. Driveway stains. That one almost made me laugh, until I realized he'd walked up close enough to our property to note the tiny oil spot left by my old pickup. At first I paid the fines. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. $50 here, $75 there. Annoying but survivable. But when the total hit nearly $500 in a single month, I snapped. I marched into the HOA office, letters clutched in my hand. Derek sat behind the desk, legs kicked up, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Authority is earned." His smirk spread the moment he saw me. "You're targeting us," I said flatly, tossing the papers on his desk. "Half of these are bogus. Nobody else is getting this many violations." He leaned forward, folding his hands. "Maybe nobody else is breaking the rules as often as you. You're out of line." "No," he said, his tone sharp as a blade. "You're out of line. And if you don't like it, maybe this isn't the neighborhood for you." I left shaking, rage boiling under my skin. But the worst part wasn't the money or the humiliation. It was the way he said it, with a kind of gleeful certainty that dared me to fight back. I wasn't the only one. I could see it in my neighbor's eyes. Mrs. Alvarez down the street used to host block parties every summer. After Derek took over, the music stopped. Her yard lights stayed dark. When I asked her why, she just shook her head. "He fined me for the balloons last year," she whispered. "Said they were litter. I can't afford another fight with him." Another neighbor, a young couple with kids, quietly removed their trampoline after Derek warned it was non-compliant. Their kids cried, but they obeyed. Everyone obeyed. That's what Derek thrived on. Fear. He didn't need guns or badges then, just the weight of his clipboard and the power of silence. But silence wasn't enough for him anymore. Not with us. One morning, I walked out to find our mailbox door ripped clean off the hinge. At first, I thought it was vandalism, maybe kids. But then I noticed the official violation notice tucked into the mangled box, as though it had been deliberately placed there. Mailbox damaged. Non-compliant with HOA standards. I confronted him at the next meeting. "Someone broke my mailbox. Then you fined me for it?" His eyes gleamed. "That's your responsibility. Fix it." Another time, my wife's garden, her pride and joy, rows of tulips and daffodils she tended every morning, was mysteriously trampled overnight. Footprints led right up to the flowers, heavy boot prints. Derek wore those same boots every day. We filed a complaint with the police, but they shrugged. "No cameras, no witnesses, nothing we can do." And Derek knew it. That's why he smirked when he passed me on the street the next day, whistling under his breath, as if daring me to accuse him outright. By then, the stress was eating us alive. My wife cried at night, clutching unpaid fines in her hands, whispering that maybe we should move. My son grew angrier with each passing day, slamming doors, talking about standing up to Derek no matter the cost. "Dad," he said one night, fists clenched, "we can't let him keep doing this. He's not just pushing us around. He's scaring people. He's tearing this whole place apart." I wanted to agree. I wanted to fight. But fear kept me in check. I was 60. I'd worked my whole life for this home. If we lost it, where would we go? What would it mean? Then Derek took things further. He began patrolling our street late at night with a flashlight, lingering in front of our house longer than anyone else's. Sometimes I'd wake at 2 a.m. and see him standing there on the sidewalk, a beam of light cutting across our windows. I confronted him once. "Why are you always outside my house?" He smirked. "Security check. Gotta make sure no one's breaking rules." "You mean us?" I spat. His smile widened. "You catch on quick." Then one night, my son came home from college to find Derek blocking the driveway. He stood there in the middle of the street, arms folded, refusing to move until my boy honked the horn. When my son stepped out of the car, Derek leaned close and whispered, "This neighborhood doesn't want you here." That was the night my son told me he wasn't afraid anymore. "If he wants a fight," he said, jaw tight, "I'll give him one." I begged him to stay calm, but inside I knew things had gone too far. Derek wasn't satisfied with control anymore. He wanted submission. And if he couldn't get it through fines and fear, he'd find another way. The tension came to a head the week before the gun incident. Derek slapped us with a final notice, an outrageous $1,500 fine for excessive noise. We hadn't even been home that weekend. I stormed into his office, my voice shaking with fury. "You can't do this. We weren't even here." He leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Then maybe your son was. Kids can be reckless. You should keep him in line." The way he said it, slow, deliberate, dripping with threat, made my skin crawl. It wasn't about noise. It wasn't about rules. It was about breaking us down, turning father against son until we either bent or broke. I walked out that day with a certainty in my gut. Derek wasn't going to stop. He was escalating inch by inch into something darker, something more dangerous. And within days, that certainty became reality. Because when Derek finally cornered my son in our driveway, his clipboard and fines weren't enough anymore. He needed something stronger, something absolute. And that's when he raised the gun. The night of the gun was the night everything changed. I can still see it frame by frame. The sharp glare of the street lamp, the smell of gun oil in the air. My son's wide eyes frozen on the weapon pointed at his chest. Derek's finger hovered too close to the trigger. And for a heartbeat, I thought the next sound I'd hear would be the deafening crack of a shot tearing my world apart. Then came the flash of red and blue. Police cruisers skidded onto the street, tires screeching against the asphalt. Neighbors' curtains fluttered, silhouettes forming in windows. But no one came out. Everyone was watching, but no one dared to intervene. The officers stepped out, hands on their holsters. I expected relief. I expected safety. But instead, I heard one of them call out, "Marshal, what's the situation?" Marshal, the word rang in my ears like a curse. Derek lowered the badge just enough for them to see, his grin spreading like oil on water. "Trespasser," he barked, jerking his chin toward my son. "I caught him where he shouldn't be." "My son is standing in our own driveway," I shouted, the words ripping out of me raw and ragged. But the officers hesitated. Their eyes flickered between me, my boy, and Derek. That was when I realized, if Derek's badge was real, if they truly believed he had federal authority, then everything we had endured was only the beginning. I forced myself to breathe, to think. If I lost control, Derek won. And if Derek won tonight, I could lose my son forever. "Put the gun down," I said, each word steady though my insides quaked. "You've gone too far." Derek's grin widened. "Too far? I've barely started." And that's when I noticed something. His badge, it wasn't quite right. The embossing looked cheap, the seal slightly off-center, the leather worn in a way that didn't match official issue. My mind flashed back to all the times he'd flashed that thing around the neighborhood, never letting anyone hold it, always snapping it shut too quickly. A fake. It had to be. But how could I prove it? The answer came from my son. With his hand still raised, his voice shook but carried through the night. "If you're really a marshal, call it in. Give them your badge number." For the first time, Derek faltered. Just a flicker. His eyes darted sideways, his grip on the gun tightening. The officers stiffened. "Yeah," I added, my voice rising with a surge of courage. "Badge number. Right now. Let's verify it." Silence pressed against us. The night seemed to stretch into eternity. Derek's jaw worked, grinding teeth. Then with a snarl, he shoved the badge back into his pocket. "I don't answer to you," he spat. The officers exchanged glances. Doubt crept into their expressions. I pressed harder. "You've been terrorizing this neighborhood for years with your clipboard and your fines. But this," I jabbed a finger toward the gun, "this is no HOA business. This is a crime. And you just proved it in front of half the street." For the first time, the power shifted. The officers moved in, their voices firm now. "Sir, put the weapon down. Now." Derek's eyes darted, desperate, trapped between his arrogance and the crumbling facade of authority. His voice cracked, sputtering excuses. He provoked me. They all did. You don't understand. I was keeping order." But the neighbors understood. One by one, doors creaked open. People stepped onto porches, phones in hand. Mrs. Alvarez, trembling but resolute, lifted her phone high. "I recorded everything," she called out. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The young couple with the kids appeared next, cameras raised, voices sharp. "We've had enough of you, Derek." Dozens of witnesses, dozens of phones. The walls he had built around himself, walls of fear, silence, intimidation, collapsed in an instant. The officers' guns were drawn now, their commands unyielding. "Weapon on the ground! Final warning!" Derek's bravado cracked. His hands shook as he finally, slowly, lowered the pistol. The clatter of steel on pavement echoed like thunder. Relief surged through me, but I didn't relax. Not yet, because this wasn't over. The officers moved in, cuffing him as he shouted, spittle flying. "You don't know who I am. I am the law here. This neighborhood, this is mine." But no one believed him anymore. The badge, when confiscated, gleamed under the cruiser's lights. Cheap metal, fake embossing, counterfeit. The truth was undeniable now. Derek wasn't a marshal. He was nothing more than a thug with a fake badge and a hunger for power. As they shoved him into the cruiser, his eyes met mine. Hatred burned there. But beneath it, I saw something else for the first time. Fear. Real fear. The neighbors gathered closer, their murmurs swelling into something almost like applause. For the first time in years, people looked at me not with pity, but with gratitude. We had stood up. We had exposed him. I put an arm around my son, pulling him close. His body trembled, but his head rested against my shoulder. For the first time that night, I let myself believe we might actually be safe. But even as the cruisers drove away, sirens fading into the distance, a single thought burned in my chest. How many years had Derek gotten away with this? How many lives had he controlled, ruined, terrified with his lies? And what would it take to make sure no one like him ever did it again? The night Derek was hauled away in handcuffs didn't just end with flashing lights and scattered neighbors. It marked the beginning of something bigger, something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. For the first time since moving into that pristine, suffocating neighborhood, I could breathe without fear of finding a violation slip on my doorstep or seeing his shadow linger under the lamppost. But relief wasn't all I felt. There was anger, too. Anger at what he had stolen from us. The peace of our home, the laughter of our son, the quiet dignity of our neighbors. The very next morning we gathered. Not just me and my family, but dozens of neighbors who had hidden behind curtains for too long. Mrs. Alvarez came to my porch with tears in her eyes, clutching her phone like a weapon. "I thought no one would believe me," she admitted, "but when I saw you stand up to him, I couldn't stay silent anymore." Others followed. Stories spilled out like water breaking through a dam. The young couple confessed that Derek had threatened to fine them daily until they removed their trampoline. An elderly veteran admitted Derek told him he'd lose his home if he didn't repaint his fence. People who had been isolated, shamed, and silenced finally realized they weren't alone. Together, we filed complaints. Real ones this time. Police reports, affidavits, recordings, pictures. A case began to build, not just against Derek as an HOA bully, but as a fraud. His badge was confirmed counterfeit. His law enforcement ties were a fantasy. And his gun, unregistered, illegal. The HOA board tried to save face at first, distancing themselves. We had no idea, they claimed. But when neighbor after neighbor stepped forward, their complicity became undeniable. They had let him run wild because fear kept dues paid and lawns trimmed. Order at any cost, not anymore. Within weeks, Derek faced charges: impersonating a federal officer, illegal possession of a firearm, harassment, and extortion. The community that once cowered under his gaze now sat in the front rows of the courtroom, phones raised, eyes burning with a hunger for justice. I'll never forget the moment the verdict was read. Guilty on every count. His face drained of color, his jaw tight, but his eyes, those arrogant eyes, finally flickered with something new. Defeat. The neighborhood changed after that. The HOA board was dissolved, replaced with a volunteer committee made up of actual residents, people who understood the difference between community and control. Rules were rewritten, not to punish, but to protect. Fines dropped. Smiles returned. And my family? We stayed. For a while, I thought about selling. about leaving the memories of Derek behind. But then I realized this was our home. He had taken enough from us. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of taking that too. One evening, months later, I stood in the driveway with my son. The same driveway where Derek had once pointed a gun, where fear had nearly broken us. My boy tossed a basketball into the hoop we'd put back up. The sound of the ball swishing through the net echoed down the street, clear and pure. He looked at me and smiled. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded, my throat tight. Better than good. Feels right. And in that moment, I understood the truth. This wasn't just about an HOA. It wasn't about fines or badges or one man's hunger for power. It was about dignity, about the right to live without fear in the place you call home. Power unchecked is a dangerous thing. It can turn a neighbor into a tyrant, a clipboard into a weapon, a badge into a lie. But when ordinary people stand together, when fear gives way to courage, no tyrant stands a chance. Derek learned that the hard way, and I learned something too. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about reclaiming what was stolen: peace, freedom, dignity. And the night my son sank that ball through the hoop again, I knew we had taken it all back. Because in the end, this neighborhood didn't belong to Derek. It never did. It belonged to us.